Hari Om. Ajam nirvikalpam nirakaramekam niranandamanandamadvaitapunam param nirgunam nirvishesham niriham parabrahmarupam ganesham bhajema parabrahmarupam ganesham bhajema. Sri Guru Namaha. Namaste. Welcome to session 98 of Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. Continuing our study of chapter 13, today our teachers will explain verses 6 to 10 of this chapter. This will be followed by the chanting of these verses. Now, I request Srimati Pannaga to take us back to the previous class and refresh the learning in that class. After Pannaga finishes, Dr. Hegde sir will take us to the day's topic. Pannaga, please.
Harihi Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The 13th chapter marks the beginning of the Antima Shatkam of the Bhagavad Gita. Titled Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yogaha, it means the yoga of the discrimination between the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna. The chapter begins with Arjuna asking Lord Krishna, "O Lord, I desire to know the following: Prakriti, Purusha, Kshetram, Kshetrajna, Jnanam, and Gneyam." The words Prakriti and Kshetram refer to the material universe, including our body and mind, because they are composed of matter too. The words Purusha, Kshetrajna, and Gneyam refer to the consciousness principle or the Chaitanya Tattva. The word Jnanam, though it meant Atma Gnana in the previous sections of the Gita, here it means virtues, values, or sadgunah. From the second slide onwards, Sri Krishna starts answering Arjuna's questions. "O Lord, O Arjuna, this body is known as Kshetram. That consciousness principle which knows this body, wise men declare that knower principle to be Kshetrajna." Now, as mentioned in the previous verse, the word Kshetram refers to all matter which makes up the world, our body and mind. In this verse, Lord Krishna singles out our body to be Kshetram because we are most attached to our body, owning it and strongly identifying with it all the time. But just like we experience the world around us, we also experience the pleasure and pain which affect our body. Only we experience it from a much more intimate angle and hence mistake it for our true self. So Krishna reminds Arjuna that this body, like the world around us, is an object of our experience. Since it is composed of matter, it undergoes change and decay. Kshiyate iti kshetram. So who is the experiencer? Kshetrajna is the experiencer subject, the knower, the Atma, the consciousness principle that enlivens the inert material universe. Hence, the great Jnanis have declared that I am the experiencer Kshetrajna, and whatever I experience is Kshetram. This shift from body identification to identifying with the indweller Atma, that is, from Kshetram to Kshetrajna, is the essence of the second verse. To put it simply, if we previously thought that I am the body and I have an Atma, we now claim that I am the Atma with an incidental body. In the next slide, we discover the Mahavakya verse. Kshetragnam chapi mam vidhi sarvakshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetragnayor gnanam yattagnanam matam mama. Sri Krishna unequivocally states, "Know me as the Kshetrajna in all the Kshetras, O Bharata. The knowledge of Kshetra and Kshetrajna is deemed by me as true knowledge." Sri Krishna is stating here that he alone is present in every one of us as our enlivening consciousness. He alone pervades the entire universe, Sarva Kshetreshu. Only the nomenclature is different. When seen from the microscopic individual angle, the consciousness is referred to as Jiva Atma. When seen from the macroscopic all-pervading totality, the same consciousness is called Parama Atma. Whatever be the differences in name and form, the Lord states that the Kshetrajna Jivatma is Sri Krishna Paramatma himself. This is the pinnacle of Vedantic teaching. The Mahavakya, where the Lord himself is revealing the supreme knowledge, Jivatma Paramatma Aikyam. We can now claim Aham Brahmasmi. In the fourth verse, Sri Krishna lists the questions he is going to answer next. What is that Kshetram? Of what nature is it? Of what effects is it? Which effect comes out of which cause? What is that Kshetrajna and of what glory is it? Hear that from me. We learn that the world of cause and effect belongs to the Kshetram alone. Lord Krishna is explicitly asking Arjuna to listen, signifying the importance of this topic. In the next slide, Sri Krishna glorifies the importance of this knowledge further. This has been taught by the many sages. This has been revealed distinctly through various Vedic hymns. This has been taught through logical and well ascertained Upanishadic statements which reveal the Brahman. Sri Krishna says it is the only knowledge where the difference between matter and consciousness has been analyzed by all the revered sages. It has been glorified by Vyasacharya in his conclusive Brahma Sutra, establishing the Jivatma Paramatma Aikyam. Therefore, he tells Arjuna and all of us to listen attentively as he proceeds to elaborate on the supreme knowledge in the most beautiful way. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you, Panaga, for a wonderful recap of the verses that we studied in the last class. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. We continue our study of the 13th chapter, where the title itself has so much for us to understand, because here we are talking about Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga. A student of the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita should be extremely clear about what is this Kshetram, which is the field of my experience, and Kshetrajna, that is the knower of the field of experience. This, in other words, is also called Drik Drishya Viveka. Drik is the experiencer or the Kshetrajna. Drishyam is the field of experiences. Certain points I would like to emphasize very much, because if these are very clearly internalized, the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita becomes more meaningful, particularly now that we have started looking at Bhagavad Gita from the angle of Disha. That means, can we study the Bhagavad Gita in the angle of studying these verses so that I discover inner strength and happiness by the Gita, not so much from a scholarship angle. All of us are a mixture. We are a combination. There is the combination of the body-mind, which is also called the ahankara, and the higher on the consciousness principle, or the sakshi. Now, this is this distinction called the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna. That's why Sri Krishna very clearly answers, Idam Shariram Kshetra. This body-mind is the Kshetra. This body-mind is the ahankara, which is the one which is doing, which experiences, that is the pramata, and it is the one which is the samsari. The body-mind complex is the one, not the body. The body perishes at the end of one's life here, but the subtle body, along with the reflected consciousness, travels from loka to loka. And it is this body and the body-mind complex which is subject to all the three forms of karma: sanchita, agami, prarabdha, punya, papa. It has all the problems. And as ahankara, we can never be free from life and life's problems. On the other hand, remember, I'm also the Sakshi. The Sakshi is the eternal samsari. The true me, the Sakshi, the higher me, never undergoes any modification, never undergoes any change. Because it is all pervading, there is no question of travel. Because it is all pervading and is infinite, to do anything, some form of movement is required. When there is no movement, the real me is an akarta. And when there is no doing, there is no experience of my action. So there is a no you are a abhokta. Therefore, although I see a mixture, there is no way I can say this is me and this is not me. Remember, we have to intellectually separate because there is no physical separation of these two entities. So the more we understand, this is my body-mind complex, but in and through this body-mind complex is the Atma, which is the real me. So whenever I say I, remember, I am a mixture of the two. The mere Sakshi can never say I because it does not have a body-mind complex to be able to speak. So it is akarta, it cannot do anything. Mere ahankara cannot say I because its very existence is because of the Sakshi. So everything is possible because of a mixture. Now, when we understand that we are a combination of two, the next question is, why do we suffer from samsara? And the answer that we will come in this Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga is that we do not have this Viveka. We do not have this Drik Drishya Viveka, and we are constantly mixing up the Atma and the Anatma part. And it is because of this self-ignorance, not only the self-ignorance, we tend to identify with the Ahankara part as the real me, which is the cause of all samsara. Once I understand that this ignorance and wrong identification, then through Kshetra Ajna Vibhaga Yoga, what do? We make a solution. And what is the solution? As Ahankara, remember, there is no permanent solution to any problem. As Sakshi, there is no problem. And therefore, the only solution is, as body-mind complex, I have various roles to play. I play the role like a drama, but all the time I am anchored in my higher self. So anchoring in your higher self, just like an actor playing on the stage, he plays various roles, but he does not identify with these roles except for the purpose of acting. This Viveka in and through all our transactions is very important. All our problems is because of Maya. Maya has got two Shaktis. One is called the Avarana Shakti and the Vikshepa Shakti. Because of Avarana, we are ignorant of the higher, the Dakshina Murti element in me. And because of the Vikshepa Shakti, I tend to identify with the body-mind complex. This is the mistake that I do internally. Externally also, the whole world that I see is existent, but it is in existence. Also, there is a existence component, which is the real reality, and the Nama Rupa or the appearance complex. Now, where is the mistake and what do we need to do? There is a beautiful verse from the Drikdrishya Viveka, which is the 15th verse, which tells us how to solve this problem, or where is the cause of the problem. Antaha Drikdrishya Vedam Bahicha Brahma Sargayo. So internally, I have to make a distinction between identifying with the Atma component and not with the Anatma or the ego component. Externally, I need to be able to make a distinction between the existence component, which is referred to as Brahma, and Sarga, which is the Nama Rupa. Avritti Apara Shakti Sa Samsara Karanam. So because of the Avarana Shakti, we have the problem of samsara. Another beautiful verse, which is the verse 20 from Drisya Viveka, says that everything in the world has got 5 components. Asti Bhati Priya Rupam Namacha Iti Amsha Panchaka. So everything in the world has got 5 components. Adya Traya, the first 3, that is Asti Bhati Priya, also called Sat Chit Ananda, is Brahma Rupam, Jagat Rupam, Tatvodvayam. So Nama and Rupa, which we add on, is part of Sarga or part of creation. So what do I do with the mistake in the world? As far as the world is concerned, I identify with the Nama Rupa. Again, because of the Avarana Shakti and the Vikshepa Shakti. So what is the solution? The solution is Kshetra, Kshetrajna, Vibhaga or Drishya Viveka. Once there is ignorance and wrong identification as the cause of the problem, the remedy will be right knowledge and right identification. The knowledge should be, whenever I say I, remember the ahankara component is only the instrument through which I function. The real me is akarta, abhokta, the sakshi principle, which has been nitya, shuddha, buddha, mukta, which is always there, which cannot be affected. So throughout, as we study the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we need to make this distinction at all times and progressively train ourselves to disidentify from the body-mind complex and identify from the Sakshi. Essentially, as Swami Anubhavananda says, we have roles to play. Whatever role I need to play this role 100% like an actor does on the stage. If I have a tragic role to play, I may even cry, but then internally there is no sorrow because this is what my role demands. And I need to play my role 100%. And finally, after studying the 13th chapter, and when I claim that I am the Sakshi, when I claim that I am Kshetrajna, as Sri Krishna said, Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. Once I claim that I am the Sakshi, will I get moksha? This is the question of a student. What will the answer be? I will not get moksha, but now I will be very clear that I have never been a samsari. I have been eternally free. I don't even need to struggle for moksha because I am born free. I will ever be free. This claiming of the Sakshi is the aim of all Vedantic study. And this is the aim of this study, Kshetra, Kshetrajna, Vibhaga Yoga. So internally, claim the Atma as myself. Externally, claim as the existence and not the Nama Rupa. With this background, we will continue the study of the Bhagavad Gita. We have now come to the 6th verse, and Sachin will explain this verse. Over to you, Dr. Sachin.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namah. The verse goes like this. Mahabhutanyahankaraha buddhiravyaktamevacha indriyani dashekamcha panchachendriya gocharaha. In the next slide, we see the meaning. Mahabhutani, the 5 elements, and ahankara, buddhi, mahata, avyaktam evacha, prakriti, dasha indriyani, the 10 sense organs, ekam chaha, the mind, cha pancha indriya gochara, the 5 gross elements. And these are briefly explained in this verse as Kshetram. We go to the next slide and see this example of how Krishna here elaborates Kshetram. Sir has already made the clear distinction between Kshetram and Kshetrajna. I would like to give the example of how it really starts, the matter principle, the tattva. First is the space, the black part of this slide, complete space. Then will be the movement starts, the air. Then fire in the form of a huge fireball, the sun. And around it, the small condensation of different matters in the form of planets and galaxies. And finally, the solid matter, the earth. We come to the next slide. Veda Vyasa in Bhagavad Gita has borrowed this Sankhya philosophy, which talks about 24 Tattvam. As we know, any topic we can divide into different ways. So to understand Kshetrajnam, there are many philosophy, but Sankhya philosophy stands up in all of them. First, what started is Prakriti. This is the basic matter principle, Tattva. Like in our modern science, we say Big Bang, but this is before Big Bang. It has no beginning to it. It is beginningless. In the stage 1 after this, the partial stage of evolution, which is Mahat. Also, we can call in modern science the Big Bang theory. The stage 2 of this, from the Mahat, will arise the Ahankara. Now, this Ahankara is the cosmic ego, not the ego, individual ego which we have. So this is the stage 1 and stage 2, as we see in the next slide. In the next slide, we see the stage 3 evolves. From the cosmic ego evolves the cosmic mind. Then through it, the Dasha Indriya. What are the 10 sense organs? The 5 Jnana Indriya and 5 Karma Indriya. And finally, this gives rise to the 5 subtle elements. So till now, it is, in the last slide, we saw Ahamkara, Prakriti, Mahat, and Ahamkara. That is the 3. In this slide, we saw cosmic mind 1, that is 4, 10 sense organ, that is 14, and 5 elements, that is 19. And finally, this will give rise to the grossest elements. So this totally makes 24. And in the final concluding slide, this is a revision of the verse, Avyaktam Buddhiha Ahamkara. This is the first 3 to arise as the objective universe, the inert material. Then comes the Manaha, then Mahabhutani, as I explained, space, air, fire, water, and earth in that order. Finally, Dasha Indriyani from them, and then the Panchikarna, the Panchendriya Gochara, the 5 grossest element, that is the individual. And then in the next verse, how the modification in the individuals will be explained. Hari Om.
Thank you, Dr. Sachin. That was a very nice explanation of Sri Krishna going into little details. He said, I will explain to you what is this Kshetram. He said initially this body is a Kshetram, and then he's including to this whole world of experiences, and then he is borrowing from Sankhya philosophy. In Sankhya, the number 24 is very important, which Dr. Sachin has nicely explained. And that is why in Kannada also we call Sankhya number. So that is how Sankhya got its name. And these are the 24 components on which the whole Sankhya philosophy derives the whole world of experience as Mahabhutani, the Pancha Indriya Gochara, the 5 objects that can be grasped by our sense organs. And then the Dasha Ekadasha, the 11 sense organs, that is the 5 sense organs, 5 organs of action, and then comes the Manaha. Then there is the Buddhi. Now, one question often comes as, what is the difference between Manas and Buddhi? Now, Manas is generally referred to certain mental activities that we cannot control. For example, I see a sad situation, sorrow will come into my mind. I will feel sorrowful. Now, we cannot prevent an emotion coming in, but then can that emotion affect my behavior? Now, if I act childish and become vulnerable to my emotions, then I have not used my buddhi. the intellect can modify my behavior. So that mental aspect which manifests as my behavior, which is under my control, is my buddhi. And therefore, we need to be able to be very clear all through in our whole experiences, what is Kshetram and what is Kshetrajna. Remember, as I told you, Drik Drishya Viveka, my body and my mind come as part of Kshetram. And therefore, if I'm going through a sorrowful experience, remember, my mind is going through a sorrowful experience. My body is going through certain pain. That means my body is experiencing certain pain. Who am I? I am an illuminator of a body going through pain. I am an illuminator of the mind that is going through depression. I am not depressed. I am not sick. But if I say I am sick and I am depressed, I have lost my capacity to make that correction. And that is why this Drik Drishya Viveka or Kshetrajna Viveka should be there all through. Verse 7 will be explained to us by Dr. Raksha. Dr. Raksha, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Ichcha dvesha sukham dukkham sangatas chetana dhrutihi etat kshetram samasena savikaramudakhrutam. We have a material universe of 24 tattvas, as explained by Sir. And in that material universe, our physical body is the modification of 5 gross elements, and our mind is the modification of 5 subtle elements. Thus, body is matter and mind is also matter. But mind is a peculiar form of matter. Even though mind is an inert matter, it has got a unique nature to manifest or reflect the consciousness and appear as though sentient. Just like when electricity passes through water, nothing happens. But when it passes through a tungsten filament in a bulb, it glows. This is because of the nature of the element. Though both of them are material, they have different capacities. Even though mind is made up of matter, it is able to absorb the consciousness principle called Kshetrajna, and the reflected consciousness makes the mind seemingly sentient. This borrowed sentiency is called Chetana. In this verse, Lord Krishna says, Sangataha is the body-mind complex. Chetana is the borrowed sentiency. As we see in this slide, Pujya Swami Paramarthananda gives this example. Imagine you have a mirror in hand and up above there is sun during the day. The mirror is able to reflect the sunlight. Mirror is non-luminous, does not have a light of its own. But with borrowed sunlight, it becomes a luminous and a bright object. It is not intrinsic, but borrowed luminosity. Like Kshetrajna is the sun, mind is like the mirror, and borrowed consciousness is like the reflected sun. In Vedanta, it is called Chidabhasa or Chit Pratibimba or Pratibimba Chaitanya. Wherever reflecting medium is present, it is Kshetram. Reflection is also a part of Kshetram. Original consciousness is not part of Kshetram, but reflected consciousness becomes part of Kshetram, means material universe. Hence, mind becomes a live mind and capable of experiencing the world. And the job of the mind is to categorize. Ichcha dveshaha. Ichcha means ragaha, attachment towards a segment of the universe. And the other side of the coin is dvesha. Lord created an objective world, which is replaced by the subjective private world. Once the world is divided into desirable and undesirable, next is sukham and dukkham. Every desirable object produces joy on arrival and sorrow by its departure. And this capacity of the world is not intrinsic. The world has no capacity to give us joy or sorrow. But when I classify the world as favorable and unfavorable, world gains capacity. In Vedanta, we have two words, padarthaha and vishayaha. Padarthaha is a neutral name for this. The moment I develop raga or dvesha towards it, the object gets the capacity to hurt me or please me. This is called vishayaha. We convert the whole world of Kshetram into vishayaha by developing ichcha and dvesha. Dhritihi is the willpower or fortitude. Once we classify the world as cause of happiness or sorrow, we use our willpower to acquire the object of joy called pravritti, or removing the list of objects called nivritti. Etat kshetram samasena savikaram udahritam. 24 tattvas are kshetram. These are the savikara or properties born out of them. Hari Om. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Raksha, for a very clear explanation of the 7th verse, where again, Shri Krishna is trying to help us to make a very clear distinction between Kshetra and Kshetrajna. It is very easy to say this world that I experience is not me. But when it comes to our own body, Shri Krishna has very clearly said right in the beginning that idam shariram kshetra. Idam shariram means not only the body, he is here in this verse talking about the mind and all the various modifications of the mind like ichcha, dukkham, dhritihi, which are part of the intellect, are all aspects of Kshetram. Who am I? I am the Kshetrajna. I am the one who is illumining all this. And the more I am able to see one step behind my body and mind, that is where the Gita gives us inner strength. And therefore, even though my mind is going through certain unhappiness, my body is going through certain discomfort, I'm able to say that my mind is going through. I can illumine what my mind is going through, but I can reassure myself that I am okay. We now come to the next important chapter of the 13th chapter, where we come into a new topic called Jnanam. And the opening verse 8 will be explained to us by Dr. Ahalya Sharma. Over to you, Dr. Ahalya.
Namaste, Hari Om. Amanitvam adambitvam ahimsa kshantirarjavam acharyopasanam shaucham stairyam atma vinigraha. Krishna enumerates 20 virtues in these verses, starting from the 8th verse. They are part of the Jnanam as they promote self-knowledge. An unprepared mind can never assimilate Vedanta, and to prepare one for Jnanam, these qualities are most essential. In fact, these virtues are often spoken of in Bhagavad Gita, showing the importance of these virtues for a sadhaka. The first one, amanitvam. Manitvam is self-admiration, to look upon oneself as a great person. Amanitvam is the opposite. That is, it is freedom from conceit or humility in simple terms. We have often heard vinayat yati patratvam, that through humility we can get the yogyata for any pursuit. A feeling of I did this or I did that creeps in unknowingly, but humility allows a person to recognize that I am only a part of the whole. The next value that he talks of is adambitvam. This is the physically expressed version of manitva. One is the internal one and this is the external one. The dress, the mannerism, the body language. To put it simply, how would I look? The pretensions that one has. Again, a subhashita comes to my mind. Keyurana vibhushayanti purusham harana chandrojvala. Nothing can adorn a person better than Vanyeka samalankaroti purusham ya samskrita dharyate. It's only the character and the speech, which is a reflection of the character, that can actually adorn a person, and no external decoration would be good enough. The need to be recognized both internally and externally is a very great one. And DVG puts it in Kagga in these beautiful 4 lines. Annadatura chinnadatura tikshna, chinnadatura kinta hennu gandolavu, mannaneya dahami ellakum tikshnatama, tinnuvudadatmavane mankutimma. Which actually means Annadatura kinta chinnadatura tikshna. The need to have a property, have money, is much more than that of food, the basic prerequisite. And the need to belong to somebody is far higher than that of property. But the greatest one, the most subtle, which can actually dig into our Atma, Tinnuvadadatmavane, is the mannaneya daha, the self-gratification. I need to be recognized. This is me, this is what it is. And if one can drop this, the idea of manitva and dambitva, then the person is on the spiritual path. The third virtue we see here is ahimsa, non-violence. It is not injuring any being at all the levels, kaika, vachika, and manasika. In Ashtanga Yoga, we find that in the Yama and Niyama, this is the first of the 10 commandments that they start. And the level of the Kaya, Vak, and Manas, each one gets subtler than the other. A body could heal after injury, but it's difficult to heal after a verbal abuse, and much more if there is a mental aberration, or if there is an injury that's been taken seriously into the mind. It may take years to heal. In true sense, ahimsa is to follow the ordained dharma. Violation of that dharma is himsa. Ahimsa is a mahavrata, for it is to be followed completely only after being devoid of raga and dvesha, which is a very big sadhana by itself. Only a sensitive mind, a cultured mind, can practice ahimsa. And as we often hear, ahimsa paramo dharma. The next value that Krishna talks of is shanti, which is mental resistance or mental immunity, which is actually an extension of ahimsa. This word has several connotations. One of the meanings we take here is that of titiksha, or mental resistance. In fact, if we remember the word titiksha, 14th verse of the 2nd chapter, matra sparshastu kaunteya shitoshna sukhadukkadaha agama paino anityaha tam titikshasva bharata. The first advice he gives in Bhagavad Gita is titiksha, which is actually acceptance of all the choiceless situations of life, acceptance without resistance. Many times we do not have control over the situation, and the only control we can exercise is in changing our attitude in such a way that we welcome the situation, we accept the situation. This is kshanti or titiksha. It is not a compromise, but it's a healthy acceptance. Titiksha is patience in the present, and kshama is patience with regard to future. When a person has titiksha and kshama, he has no reason to be stressed. He can be anayasa, as Swamiji says. The next virtue we see is arjavam, which is uprightness or integrity. It is oneness in thought, word, and deed. It is to keep up one's commitment at any cost. Satyam is also a kind of arjavam. Acharya upasanam. It is a very important virtue, especially for a Vedantic student. Reverence to the teacher. Acharya represents the Shastra Jnana, and the elite group here knows everything about the Acharya Upasana. We have discussed this in our previous classes of Dakshinamurti, Guru Purnima Stotra, Guru Purnima discussions, etc. The next virtue is Shaucham, purity. And this is also to be done at all levels, both Anta Shaucha and Bahya Shaucha. In fact, all the preparatory ones that Krishna speaks of, Amanitva, Adambitva, etc., They're all a part of mental hygiene only. And this is very much required to keep the mind healthy. And the next virtue is thairyam, which is steadfastness, willpower, perseverance. There will be obstacles and setbacks to any work on hand, and thairyam is that ability to be steadfast, to continue despite all odds. In fact, on the part of Vedanta, this is an extremely important one, because many of us tend to think this is difficult and may want to give up at some stage. Atma vinigraha, which is self-control or self-mastery. Atma here is the Sthula Sukshma Atma, and Vinigraha is mastery. So managing our emotions, our tempers, our tongue, our food habits, our lifestyle, every little thing becomes very important. So the 9 virtues that Krishna talks of are amanitva, freedom from self-glorification; adambitvam, simplicity and humility; ahimsa, non-violence; kshanti, acceptance without resistance; arjavam, integrity, or acharyopasanam, reverence to the or surrender to the teacher; shaucham, purity; stairyam, steadfastness; atma vinigraha, self-control. These 9, the rest of it will continue, but they become the basis of all the other sadhanas. With this, Krishna has just started it, and we shall see the rest in the other shlokas. Namaste.
Thank you, Dr. Ahalya, for explaining this important verse. From verse 8 onwards, for the next 5 verses, Sri Krishna enters into another very, very important topic, very important for spiritual seekers, the importance of values, because we all know all these values. The problem is not that we do not know. To know something and not to be able to apply what you know is equal to we do not know. And just like we have for emotional upset, Swamiji has given us an FIR, how frequently I get upset, what is the intensity of my upset, how long I take to recover. So too, we need to make a personal inventory to see how often I fail as far as my values are concerned. And it is this list of values that we need to work on, which is an extension of the Yoga Sutras, the 5 yamas and the 5 niyamas. In this particular verse, 2 things are very much emphasized: amanitvam and adamhitvam, which are the function of the ego. The ego wants to prove that I am somebody far greater than what I am. I pretend to know things which I may not to be too sure of, or I pretend to show myself as being something else. That is why our Swami Anubhavanandaji repeatedly tells us, you don't have to prove anything to anybody. Among the other qualities being ahimsa. And remember, it may not be through action, but through our words and even through thoughts we can hurt people. The word shantir here means something very similar to titiksha, where I become mentally strong. And arjavam, that means internally, I am what I would like to be externally. I am being straightforward. There is no disparity between who I am internally and who I am externally. What is the greatest service I can do to my acharya? The greatest service, my acharya's only intention is to be able to propagate spiritual wisdom and to see in what way I can help my acharya to see that this wisdom is propagated. All through our day, we need to be very observant to see where is that I falter in my values. So an important spiritual practice is implementing these values and also be aware whenever we falter in the implementation of these values. The values will continue in the next verse, verse 9, that will be explained to us by Indumati. Over to you, Indu.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. After dealing with Kshetra and Kshetrajna, now Lord Krishna is dealing with a third topic called Jnanam, which refers to a set of virtues which will keep the mind healthy. Just as there are certain physical parameters which will indicate the physical health. There are certain parameters which indicate the mental health, by which the intellect will be freely available for higher pursuit. As we saw in the previous verses, Sri Krishna gives a list of some more virtues here also. The verse goes like this: Indriyartheshu vairagyam anahankara eva cha janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha doshanudarshanam. In the next slide, we have the meaning of Indriyartheshu vairagyam. Those two words together refer to the value of mastering of the sense organs. We have got two sets of sense organs. They are Jnanendriyani, through which we receive the input from the world, and the other is Karmendriyani, through which we express ourselves by responding to the external world. So, sense organs are extremely important for interaction with the world and also for the spiritual sadhanas. We have to make sure that they are under our control and we are not the slaves of our sense organs. This avoidance of slavery to the sense organs, otherwise called Indriya Nigraha or Pratyahara. We have 5 segments: Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. When the sense organs come in contact with any object on a regular basis, unknowingly, the sense organs develop an attachment to the sense objects. Sri Krishna has said in the 2nd chapter, Shloka 60, Yatadokyapi kaunteya purushasya vipaschitaha indriyani pramathini haranti prasabam manaha. The turbulent senses do violently carry away the mind of a wise man, though he may be striving hard to control them. All forms of tapas, vratams, etc. that we practice are all meant for avoidance of slavery. In Yoga Shastra, it is called Pratyahara. In Vedanta Shastra, it is called Damaha. In Sadhana, it is called Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti. In the next slide, we have some more virtues. The virtue here is Anahankara, means humility. Ahankara means self-conceit. Humility is being free from freedom and egoism, arrogance, vanity, and so on. In the next slide, we have Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi Dukkha Doshanudarshanam, perception of or reflection upon evils in birth, death, old age, sickness, and pain. Anudarshanam means constantly remembering or reminding ourselves of the doshas of various defects, deficiencies, problems involved in dehabhimana, that is body orientation. What are the doshas then? They are Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, and Dukkha. The body is subject to 5-fold problems. Every physical body in the world goes through these modifications, and each one of them is an inlet for fresh source of sorrow. Jara means old age. Vyadhi means disease. Then finally, Mrityu means Maranam. Leaving everything which are near and dear means separation. All these problems are dukkhams, and dukkha's are the defects of physical life. To conclude, Pujya Swamiji Sri Paramarthanandaji says, if we remember these doshas, we will never be interested in dehabhimana, and therefore dehabhimana dosha darshanam is a requisite for Atma Jnanam. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Indumati for another nice chanting and explanation of verse number 9, where we continue the Jnanam component. That means various values to be followed, that we will have likes and dislikes, but let it not be binding. And also the dosha or the dukkha that we experience because of aging, because of sickness, and because of death. Verse number 10 will be explained by Dr. Ashwini. Dr. Ashwini, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Asaktir anabhishvangaha putradara grihadishu nityam cha samachittatvam ishtanishtopapatishu. Yes, Damaha was the one which was talked about in the previous verse, where Indriya Nigraha or Indriyarteshu Vairagyam, detachment from the standpoint of sense organs. Here in this verse, there are three virtues which are talked about. The first one being Samaha or Asakti, which deals with Mano Nigraha. But why does Lord Krishna talk about both of them? Since mind is a subtler instrument, mental detachment cannot be attained easily. Taking the mind away from the object of attachment is extremely difficult. Whereas sense organs, which are external instruments and are at grosser level, are relatively easier to control. For example, if a person has a tendency to use a particular addiction-causing object, it can be physically separated from the sense organs, but the mind will still continue to dwell on that. And as long as the mind dwells on it, the person can have re-addiction. Initially, we start off with sense control, but mind continues to have vasana and therefore it needs better handling. How do we do that? It has to be educated of the evils involved in addiction. And once the mind is mastered, temptations are better handled. This is the higher stage of detachment born out of Viveka Shakti. And only when a person says no out of discrimination, it becomes transcending. If a person stops habit because of others' pressure, it only becomes suppression. Therefore, suppression should be converted to transcendence. Transcendence is the inner detachment. Next slide, sir. The next virtue is Putradara Grihadishu Anabhishvangaha. These two words should be put together. It means absence of excessive or over attachment. The intense or Tivra Ragaha towards Putra or Putri, child, Dara, wife or husband, spouse, Griham, own house, Adi, etc. Other close things with whom you live decades and your life is closely intertwined with. And you cannot avoid attachment with them. So attachment will be there. And therefore, Lord Krishna says, I do not ask you to avoid attachment. I am only saying avoid excessive or over attachment. This is, in fact, concession given to Grihasthas. But how do we differentiate between attachment and excessive attachment? Anandagiri writes a sub-commentary for Shankaracharya's commentary differentiating attachment and over-attachment. He defines attachment as mamakaraha, claiming a thing or a person as mine. But when the attachment becomes excessive, then it is no more mamakara, it becomes tivra ragaha. I become one with the object. I do not see any difference between that object or person and myself. That means whatever happens to that person, I take it as though it is happening to myself. If I think my life has no meaning without another person, it is excessive attachment. Because the fact is, every life has got its own meaning, irrespective of other people being there or not. We've all come to earth for a particular purpose of spiritual evolution, and we all need to achieve that independently. Bhagavan connects few people so that our growth is helped. One should remember that life is like a train journey. Each one has a destination to reach. Many climb, many get down, many become friends on the way. But finally, all of us are individuals and are here to grow and help others to grow. The next virtue is Nityam cha samachittatvam. Ishta nishtopapattishu. This gives essence of karma yoga. Ishta means favorable situations. Anishta means unfavorable situations. Upapattishu is on their arrival. Samachittitvam means freedom from elation or freedom from depression also. Reminding oneself that any situation is temporary, be it happy or sorrow. Both are temporary and it will part away. Therefore, Lord Krishna says whether it is favorable or unfavorable, learn to maintain the equanimity. Not that the mind will not be disturbed at all, it will be, but let it be a manageable disturbance. And how to achieve that? Lord Krishna says, learn and practice that. The first stage is Karma Yoga. The higher stage is Jnana Yoga. Karma Yoga is like first aid. Jnana Yoga is the ultimate cure. Accepting every experience as Ishvara Prasada helps us to remind ourselves that Bhagavan takes care of me, especially for my spiritual growth. Thus, Prasada Buddhi helps in Samachittatvam. And when Lord Krishna says Nityam throughout our waking hours, let's all attempt to maintain peace. So, the entire second line is one value, and that is Samatvam through Karma Yoga. The next slide, to conclude this verse, non-attachment, non-identification of the self with son, wife, home, and the rest, and constant even-mindedness on the attainment of the desirable and undesirable. Hari Om. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwini, for a nice explanation, specifically giving a clear distinction between what is suppression and what is transcendence. The more there is viveka, you're able to move away from suppression. Once we know about these values always become a conflict between what I want to do and these values. But the more viveka sets in, viveka here is Kshetrajna viveka, Bhaga viveka. That means I am not my body. If I am my body, then my wife, my children, my house, my possessions will all come into being. But if the first viveka is very clear, that these are only roles that I have to play, and I am not this body, that viveka is the first viveka that we need to work. And through this understanding, through the state of samatvam, through karma yoga, through upasana yoga, it now becomes what looked like idealistic now becomes possible. With that, we conclude today's class. I'm requesting Aditi to please chant the verses from 6 to 10 of chapter 13. Aditi, please.
Hari Om, Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Mahabhutanyaham buddhiravyaktamev cha indriyani dashekancha panchachendriya gocharaha ichchadvesha sukham dukkham sanghataschetana dhritihi etat kshetram samasena savikaramudahritam amanitvamadambhitvam ahimsakshantirarjavam acharyopasanam shaucham sthairyamatmavinigraha indriyateshu vairagyam anahankara eva cha janma mrityujara vyadhihi dukkha doshanudarshanam asaktiranabhishvangaha putradara grihadishu nityam cha samachittat Tvam ishtanishtopapatishu. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you, Aditi, for a professional, effortless chanting. Thank you all the teachers of the day for a wonderful session. Next Friday on 27th May 22, we will continue our study of 13th chapter. On Monday, 23rd May 22, let us log in for next episode of the short time at 6:45 p.m. Until then, Jai Shri Krishna. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om.